Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our little virtual town hall we're having here. We're starting a little late, so I think we're just going to get right into it. I'm Megan Davey. I'm a field organizer in Northern Virginia for the Virginia 2020 Coordinated Campaign. And I'm here today with Senator Barbara Favola and Matt DeFronte, who is a council member, a board member of the
Oop, I think you just clicked on mute.
Am I better now?
Yes.
Perfect.
So sorry.
No problem.
It wouldn't be a virtual meeting without some sort of technical issue. All right, so we've got Senator Barbara Favola, who represents the 31st District of the Virginia State Senate, and Matt DeFronte of the Arlington County Board. All right, so we have a couple topics we're going to cover today, from climate change to affordable housing and gender equality. So let's just get right into it.
Sure.
Right. So, Senator Favola, this year.
Did you want me to start going through those issues, or did you have a specific question?
I had a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Great. No, I don't. That's great.
All right. Sounds perfect. All right. So this year we passed the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which sets the goal for the state to use 100% clean energy by 2045. Could you tell me, how does the bill attempt to combat the dangers of climate change?
Oh, that's a great question. In fact, it's a very comprehensive bill, and we do it with both a carrot and a stick. By 2024, we're requiring, it's primarily Dominion Energy, to close all the coal plants, which will go a long way in getting us to a carbon-free economy. Now, the overall goal is carbon-free by 2045. The regulatory process kicks in the year 2050. So that's, you just need to understand that. My plan, my energy plan, set up the ambitious goals. The Clean Economy Act sort of set up the very specific strategies by which we're going to get there. There are some incentives for solar. We removed some impediments that local governments had to grapple with in allowing solar generating mechanisms to come up in their jurisdictions. People will be able to sell solar back to the grid now. We had a very narrow box by which people could access solar. Now that box is much broader. They will be able to sell some back to Dominion. Dominion has to be on a renewable energy portfolio, like I said, again, by 2045. And then the very ambitious goal is the entire electricity grid has to be carbon neutral by 2040. So that's a big deal. We are very proud of this. I'm just so glad we tackled it when we did, because even the last week of the General Assembly session, when we were going through a lot of imaginations, that's when our bills go into conference. COVID-19 was beginning to rise into the agenda, and people were worried about it. And businesses and the business lobbyists were looking at the impact on Wall Street, and we were already getting pushback that perhaps we're moving too quickly, that perhaps this bill should be tabled. But because of the fine work that people like you may not have been with us in 2019, but you were in spirit. We did have enough progressive voices in our General Assembly to get the bill passed. And I want to say that there was an editorial, surprisingly, in the Roanoke Times, which talked about the growth in the green economy. And 100,000 people are employed in Virginia in green jobs. And we're expecting about 13,000 jobs annually to come up as we met the requirements of the Clean Economy Act. So I'm very excited about it.
That's amazing. And you're also a member of the Senate Transportation Committee. So what are some ways that you're addressing the need for greener transportation methods throughout this?
That's a great question. And I think part of my answer, I'm sure Matt DeFronte would want to talk about as well. We passed a bill that will require local governments to consider green energy strategies in any comprehensive plan that they might pass. And, Matt will explain to you that local government has a lot of it is thinking about the physical attributes of your community, as well as, the social and economic and the people aspects. So as you go through these sort of sector plans, we now are going to require that you consider green transportation options. We did get funding restored for the Metro. We've got the additional tax dollars, the mechanisms restored, which would be, and the grantor's tax, which is a tax on real estate that the seller would pay when they're actually selling real estate. However, the economy is such right now, people aren't staying in hotels to pay the TOT, and people aren't really buying at the moment. But we did get those tax structures back to help finance Metro, so we don't have to steal from, I don't like to use that word, reallocate from the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. It's up here, we're pretty, and I'm very the work that the county board has done, and I know that when I was on the county board, we always tried to come up with multimodal approaches, and Arlington's known for that. They've got a lot of bike lanes. They've got trails. They've got an incredible comprehensive bus route, and I think you still have the art bus folks to the Metro, so it goes to every corner of our county, gets people to the Metro. So it's really good thinking like that, which move us, I think, towards a greener economy. A lot of this work is done at the local level, though. We can set the framework, we can create incentives for you, but the land use and transportation, the intersection is done at the local level.
That's great. And would you talk a little bit about how that is being done at the local level here in Arlington?
I'm happy to, and I love the first two questions because deep into the Virginia Clean Economy Act, and so I loved hearing your comments, Senator Favola, and really we've had great leadership from the time before you were on the county board, but we set a trajectory. But this is very important to me, and it's an example of how both at the state level and at the local level, elections matter because you have to have people who are committed to these ideals. And so Arlington has had great leaders on the county board. We have a community energy plan, which we updated last year to set as 2035. It's a little more ambitious than the statewide framework, but is 2035 is the time for 100% renewable electricity. And we've made actually some significant progress on that earlier this year before COVID set in with an agreement with Dominion Energy that to Senator Favola mentioned the physical aspects of the county government. We're trying to get by 2025, we're trying to have the county government operations be all our electricity be renewable energy. And we had a partnership that really is new and a great one with Dominion Energy, and we're going to contract for a solar farm that's actually out of Southern Virginia. So that's part of what we're working on, and it's, we're in a very different time now, but we know that over the next 2, 4, 8 years, leadership really matters, and that's where we absolutely must win this, because on the environment, there has been no president worse than the current one, in my view. And the folks who are up, all of our members of Congress, Don Beyer is a great member of Congress. So that's a little policy, but it's also a lot about how important it is that in a difficult time, we have the engagement of everybody on this call, and we reach out and build those connections in the fall.
Absolutely. Right. Moving on. Senator Favola, you passed a bill this year, the No More Surprise Medical Bills Act, which ensures that Virginians aren't unknowingly charged for out-of-network providers. Can you explain what this bill does and how it protects Virginians from bankruptcy and medical bills?
Oh, I really would. Yeah, thank you so much. I really want to explain that bill. My professional background before I was on the county board was actually as a health policy expert in the federal government and on Capitol Hill. This actually took a lot of work. The interest groups were not particularly easy to work with. It was the Virginia Health and Hospital Association, the insurance companies, and then a range of different doctors groups. But I brought them all together, and I made sure we had some consumer advocates there, like the Virginia Poverty Law Center and our Bureau of Insurance and some think tanks, because it was very important to me that consumers be protected. And my bill now covers not just emergency care, but non-emergency care. So if an individual has insurance and they go to a doctor, either for an emergency or for a planned surgery, and one of the providers is outside their network, they are not charged any more than they would be if that provider were in the network. And the difference must be, it's negotiated between the provider and the patient's insurance plan. The patient is removed from any deliberations. They don't have to, they're not in the middle of it. They don't need additional medical, any surprise medical expense, which is a very big deal because, for example, anesthesiologists can be expensive, quite expensive. And as we did our research, we found many of the charges that were out of network were anesthesiologists, which surprisingly enough. So to get into the weeds, my bill says that a patient insurance plan must make a reasonable offer to the provider, the out-of-network provider. The provider has a limited period of time to accept the offer. If the provider does not, then it goes before a arbitrator who is hired by the State Bureau of Insurance, and the arbitrator is going to evaluate the case and make a decision. It's either it's going to be one offer or the other, either the offer made by the insurance company, or if the provider has a stronger case to make, then maybe he'll go with the provider. But it's worked in Washington, the state of Washington. Healthcare costs have gone down. Consumers have been protected. Doctors have been happier. Hospitals have been happier. So it was the right thing to do. We had to really, I haven't had hired as much attention we met probably 3 times a week, and I personally oversaw the meetings. We had to negotiate through the process to make sure the bill didn't go into conference. So it was a challenge. But we got it through, and everybody was so excited. I mean, they were, my gosh, they'd been trying for many years, and so I have to believe that some headway was made before I took the helm. And I was proud that headway had been made, but I took an entirely different approach, which turned out to be one that sailed through. So, we're really proud of that. And it was healthcare, actually, access to healthcare and making healthcare affordable. The top issues on our voters' minds in 2019, that and gun safety, and actually women's reproductive health. So it sort of fell into those based on our polling data of those likely to vote. Up here in Northern Virginia, our K through 12 systems are very well funded. Our local governments have resources. We have a highly educated constituency up here. They demand a good public education system. So that was not quite as high identified as a high need issue according to our voters, but certainly healthcare was. It was the number one issue.
Absolutely. You also passed a bill expanding access to telemedicine, which in the coronavirus pandemic has become so important. Can you tell me how this bill help patients, and what are some next steps for increasing access to healthcare in the future, which, as you said, is a huge issue on everyone's minds, I think. It
absolutely is a huge issue. So my bill actually ensures that if a provider is licensed in another state, they, within 20 days after applying to our Board of Medicine, have to receive an endorsement, which would be permission to practice in this state. So that it could not have come at a more opportune time. The other really important part of the bill sets up zones, medical excellence zones is what they're called. And what we're trying to do is bring more health care to our underserved areas in many of the rural parts of the state. So we're going to set up a task force. We're expecting to get a report in November. And not just doctors, and it's doctors, physician assistants, nurse practitioners are also covered under my bill in terms of the quick endorsement process. And also when we're creating these medical zones of excellence, we're very proud that 300,000 individuals now have access to insurance because we expanded Medicaid. It took us 4 years. There are another 100,000 individuals out there who are eligible, and somehow we haven't caught them in the outreach efforts, so they haven't signed up. But many of these folks are in areas that don't have enough medical care, and clinics will have to open to really serve them. So, that was part of the energy behind my medical excellence zone idea. And I do want to say that Medicaid expansion, of course, has helped our rural hospitals, because with so many people uninsured, proportionally, I mean, they don't have the numbers of people living in those parts that we have up here, but when you look proportionally at the number of people who are uninsured, it's very high. And so their hospitals were providing basically care at no charge or no cost to the patient, because the patient didn't have any resources. So Medicaid expansion is such a needed thing, and we're hoping that it actually helps people stay healthy. Maybe they'll go to a doctor when they're initially sick. They won't wait until they've got extreme conditions and they end up going to the emergency room. We're hoping we can get individuals into medical homes. We're hoping to do a lot more with maternal child health. We have wide gaps in our maternal and child health indicators when we're looking at race, and we need to close those gaps. African-American child born in the state is, 4 times more likely to be low birth weight, and more likely to suffer other conditions, and of course the death rate for Black children, Black babies, is higher proportionally than for white babies. And the governor is actually setting up a group to look at this mortality factor.
Absolutely. So Matt, so housing affordability is a huge issue that affects everyone in Arlington. So how are you working to improve affordability and make homeownership possible for more Arlingtonians?
That's a good question, and I'm glad that you didn't ask me about healthcare, because I leave Senator Favola for the expertise. We are very lucky to have that level of detail, and I admire but don't envy getting into that level of detail on healthcare policy. It's important. Housing is an issue that the senators also worked on while on the county board and now. But housing affordability is a huge challenge in Arlington. And you asked, it's changed in the time of COVID. We have been building additional affordable units so that folks can, that people can afford the rent and can afford to live in Arlington. We're the 5th or 6th by income wealthiest county in the country. But that doesn't mean we don't have a lot of folks who need more affordable rent. And now we have had 1,000 Arlingtonians file for unemployment in the last 2+ months. So it's a huge issue, and I was working on it today. The courts have put a stay. They've held off on evictions, and they just extended that to June 28th. So we're pleased about that. so we were building additional units, and we're still trying to do that. But because of COVID, we've shifted a lot of our focus and attention to keeping people from becoming homeless and staying in their homes. And so we have a program, we have a housing grants program. We also have an emergency assistance program that goes through the county and Arlington Thrive that has helped over 800 families so far. And these can be housing costs and they can be other costs, so that you're not in a position where it can be food, but housing has really been the focus. And we know we're going to have to put more resources into that over the coming year. It's a difficult time budget-wise. We did set aside a good chunk of resources for this, but we've had the county manager in this budget year that ends July 1st has already put in significant chunks of additional money. And we're spending close to $100,000 a week just to try and help people under 50% of area median income, which the median income is high in Arlington, but 50% comes down lower. And so, that could be 50 or 55,000 for a family, but much lower for a single individual. So we're helping folks that are in that most area of need through housing affordability. You also asked about home ownership, and it's a good enough question that it's the hardest question that you probably could have asked, because we do have a home ownership program, and many young Democrats ask me about this often, and it's a difficult challenge. But our home ownership program is called the MyPAP program, and it's a small program. It doesn't help as many people as we'd like, and we want our teachers, firefighters, police officers, our people who work at nonprofit healthcare groups in DC. We want them to be able to. We want the American dream real for them, and we've got a lot more to do there. And that's one where some people call it the missing middle. Is a term that's related to home ownership. We've got to do some more work, and we were set to do a lot of the public engagement on the smaller types of homes, the one bedrooms, the townhomes, the flats that could be more affordable. But it's an issue. It's a zoning issue that is not an easy one, and so we were going to do some in-person public engagement, and that has fallen back 6 months or so, at least because of COVID-19. So we're working a lot more work to do on home ownership, but we are always thinking every day about affordable housing for sure. Absolutely.
Senator Favola, one of the most historic achievements of this session was the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. Now that it's passed, what is next for the ERA, and what else can be done at the state level, and what can folks who are watching at home do to help?
Oh, that's a great question. There was so much excitement when we were able to get that passed, because, of course, in 2019, the then Speaker would not allow the resolution to come up for a vote. And we knew that it would have passed in 2019, but 2020 brought a sea change, and we also elected our first women Speaker of the House, or the caucus selected Eileen Fillicorn, and again, she's from Northern Virginia. So she was very committed, and so were the other lawmakers. We got the amendment to the floor, and it was easily ratified. So there was bipartisan support. I want to make that clear up front. Congress had established a deadline for the ratification, and it's passed. So the question is, will Congress go back and change that deadline? And a bill has been introduced in the House of Representatives to change the deadline. And I don't know if it's, where it's going to go in the legislative process. I don't expect the U.S. Senate will adopt a change. I do expect that there will be a lawsuit, and ultimately the Supreme Court will have to decide if, in fact, the deadline is a barrier or or did we actually meet the constitutional requirements for incorporating an Equal Rights Amendment into our Constitution? You know, nowhere in that amendment does it use the word female. It just said there shall not be discrimination on the basis of sex. This, in my view, and in the view of a lot of experts, is an advantage to men as well as women. As roles are continuing to change, as, you know, the norms of society are different, it will take time for things such as insurance coverage or all, you know, all kinds of supports that are based on a more traditional model. So I believe men might benefit as well under the Equal Rights Amendment, because they're again, it's does not mention male or female. And you know, there is an amendment in the Constitution, and it took like 200 years to get it through. And then that amendment deals with the increase in salaries of Congress people. They have to you know, run for election, I think, after the increase. So that's an interesting historical note, and we're looking forward to seeing where this you know, where we go from here. But it was very empowering to be the 38th state, and very fitting for Virginia. And a point most people don't know: the state constitution, the Virginia Constitution, which was written many, many years ago, and we can thank Mr. Mason and others, but he had the lead on writing the Virginia Constitution, does have an Equal Rights Amendment in it. Imagine that. So
I'm taking notes. That's great.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's a little trivia question. A lot of people would not have known, but I had to defend. I was one of the speakers defending that on the floor of the Senate, so I wanted to get all my trivia lined up. The debate was just amazing. I mean, the people who spoke against it were really, you know, fed talking points by the very far right, and you know, they were bringing up the abortion issue and a number of other things that really were not related to the Equal Rights Amendment. So, but that's bound to happen when you have people who are very driven by a philosophical bent.
Absolutely. That's so great. And I know we started a little late, but I believe we're going to wrap up pretty soon. So if we have any closing remarks from either of you, I'd love to hear them. Senator Favola, you want to start?
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for organizing this, and I think that shows that the Joint Campaign is caring about the local issues and wants to hear from local officials, and so that's a very good start. That makes us feel that you want to get to know us. We appreciate that, because so often campaign workers sort of parachute in and then parachute out, and we really don't get a chance to connect on any real important level. You know, elections matter. This is one thing that really showed in this past session. We were able to move the minimum wage forward. We decided to take, you know, a phased approach where the minimum wage would go up to $12 by the year 2023, and then the General Assembly will reevaluate and see what the economic impact has been as a result of the increase in the minimum wage throughout the state, and decide if we're going to move forward and how we're going to move forward in terms of increasing it to $15 an hour. But that very much is a living wage, is very much a goal that the Democratic majority ran on, and we care about, and I deeply care about the living wage concept. And then, of course, we were able to we removed barriers to you know, accessing abortion care, and we ensured that, you know, the protections provided under Roe versus Wade are actually now reflected in our state laws. It's always nice to follow the Constitution. And then you know, we made great progress on the green economy, which, you know, environmental issues have been just put on the back burner, and it just, you know, broke your heart. We did get a plastic bag bill through, which it's not perfect, but it's, you know, it will apply to Northern Virginia, and jurisdictions can opt in and within Northern Virginia. And then outside of Northern Virginia, it's voluntary. I think they can opt in, and there's a slight tax, so dollars can go to the local government and dollars can go back to the state. With the hope that money, it's not earmarked, but with the hope we can use some of it to really clean up the Chesapeake Bay and to address other environmental issues. And then the other thing that I have to say, gun safety was just front and center. We addressed those issues in the first 2 weeks. The enormous groundwork of Moms Demand Action, the Coalition Against Gun Violence, Everytown, and a number of other activists who may not have been dues-paying members of those groups. The Brady Group, for example, is another group. They were just knocking doors for us and turning out the vote, and gun safety was a big deal. We actually did get universal background checks through. We did close the gun show loophole. And, we've got a red flag bill on the books. This was enormous progress. We never would have guessed we could have gotten this much done in one session. And lastly, I will conclude with the election reform, because it's so important to us. It's important to the work you're going to do, Megan, and it's important to everybody here. It's important to voters. And looking at this incredible issue that just unfolded before our eyes on the George Floyd situation and how some of our national leaders have been addressing it. If you don't think a vote matters, I think you need to go back and reconsider what's happened these last few days. But we have no excuse absentee voting and no excuse absentee ballot in, which is great. We'll be able to start the polls, early voting 45 days before the election. We took away the photo ID requirement. That is now gone. And we're actually making voter registration easier through the Department of Motor Vehicles. We had some glitches in the past, and we've now tightened the law. So, this is great. Who would have expected we would have come as far as we have? But to remove a lot of the restrictions on voting, I think is going to make a huge difference. So I'll stop. And I just want to say we have a lot of work ahead of us. 2020 is an incredibly important year, and we are all going to work with you. Megan, Adam, and Jimmy Rogers, and the whole team, we're behind you, and we are going to be successful in 2020.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for everything. Board Member DeFronte, did you want to add anything?
Sure. So you covered a lot of great issues there, but I'll say if we think about what's at stake in 2020 on so many issues that Senator Warner has worked on and on so many issues that Arlington cares about and young Democrats across generations that folks care about, there's a ton at stake. So on the ERA, thank goodness, this is, if you think back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's one of her first cases was to open up opportunity for men. And if you think about how past time is it that we should have a president or a vice president, and we will have a vice president who's a woman? It's it's ridiculous. It's so past time that should have happened. And we just this week got a great editorial. Vote by mail is something that we will want to do. We have to do to stay safe. Gun safety we made so much progress. Most young Democrats that I know think, what's the problem with common sense gun safety? Why can't we get that done? And this election is part of getting that done. And Arlington, we have a role to turn out our vote quickly and early. And we will have, Senator Favola, we will have a different voting calendar in the fall because of what Senator Favola did and her colleagues did. And our job, as I see it, because I worked a long time ago probably 2004. I'm not going to guess what stage you were at, Megan, but I was an organizer then, and early vote was big in Iowa then. If we turn out our vote in Arlington early, we can change the map so that it's easier to address North Carolina and Pennsylvania. So those issues are at stake. Affordable housing is at stake because we won't be able to make progress on that if we don't have a different, Senator Warner is a huge leader on that. And racial justice is at stake in this election. Our police officers were used as props on Monday night, and the county board called them back across the river. We believe in mutual aid. It's something that everybody knows that concept.
Yeah.
And Senator Favola is familiar from her time on the board. But we don't believe that the president should use protesters or police as props. And that is completely inconsiderate and completely inappropriate. And he's been tone deaf on that, and he's been tone deaf on racial justice. And we have to vote. President Obama got chided by one of President Trump's infantile tweets, and he just said, vote. So there's so much at stake. One thing I just have to say is, before I close, is that voting matters also in local elections. And we have an election on July 7th, which is a very odd time for an election. But Senator Favola has endorsed Takis Karantonis. He's the Democratic nominee. I am endorsing Takis. I know him well. Mm-hmm. And so anyone who's seeing this, there are fewer votes in this election, and we can't do what we need on the environment or on affordable housing if Takis doesn't join us on the county board. So big thank you to both of you and to everyone watching. It's breathtaking what's at stake. And so that gives us a special opportunity to write history in the right way.
Absolutely.
I just want to say, Matt, thank you for your comments. But true police reform actually is going to take place at the state and local level. So if in fact we want to make change, Matt, you're absolutely right. Local elections matter. And the only time Democrats have lost on the county board in recent years is when there was a special election. So it's July 7th. We encourage everybody to right now go to the registrar's website and request an absentee ballot and fill it out. So, and I really thank you, Matt. I enjoy working with you and your colleagues. You're very lucky.
We got good leaders now. Just if we can keep it going, we're on a roll.
Keep it going.
Thank you, Meg.
Thank you both so much. I just want to encourage anyone watching to join the Coordinated Campaign Slack channel. If you go to markwarnerva.com and you click on digital organizing, that's a great way to get in touch with any of us. And we're also having a digital organizing event this Saturday at 3 p.m. You can go and start getting involved. And thank you both so much for being here. I can't wait to work with both of you and everyone watching to elect Democrats all throughout Virginia. Thank you so much.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.